Greetings, everyone. I'm Jonathan Kipp, your town moderator, and I'm joined by Sherry Farrell, your town clerk. And this is the second segment that we're doing on voting information in Londonderry. In the first segment, which I hope you've had an opportunity to view, we covered what goes on before an election. And today we're going to talk about absentee voting. We get a lot of questions about this, Sherry, and also there's some confusion about it, I think. And you and your staff in Town Hall are responsible for managing the absentee ballots, receiving them, and then sending them out to eligible voters. So tell us what that process looks like.
All right. So as we mentioned in our last segment, town elections and our state elections are a little bit different in how they're handled. So for the primary that's coming up, the state sends us what they believe to be an acceptable number of absentee ballots based on our past performance with voters in past primaries, throughout the last few years. We wait anxiously because people really have started back even in the spring coming in and filling out the absentee ballot request form. And I just brought one along to see. The front's a little deceiving, a couple quick boxes to check off, basically stating why you can't come and vote in person that day. It might be because of a disability. It might be because you're caring for children at home. There's an array of reasons. You check off each box, and then on the back you do have to be a little bit more specific about your Londonderry address, and if we're going to be mailing the ballot to you, where do you want us to mail the absentee ballot to when they arrive? And for us, they finally arrived about the first week in August, which is great. It gives everyone time to complete their ballot and quickly and efficiently mail it back to us. And it will designate that if a lot of people are moving to Florida, living in Florida part-time, and we'll be happy to send that ballot to your Florida address or your Colorado address, wherever it is that you'd like to receive it. The key is that you do want to get it back in the mail so that we have it in time to properly complete the rest of the process on the end.
What's the deadline for receiving absentee ballots in the mail, Sherry?
Great question. So in the mail, which I found fascinating at first, up until 5 o'clock on election day, all absentee ballots can be accepted and processed. That means that our phenomenal staff over in the clerk's office, they're waiting for the mail to be delivered on election day to make sure that they then bring those absentee ballots that arrived on Tuesday to us so that they can then be processed on election day. And everyone's very conscious of that because, again, every vote is so important and every vote needs to be counted. So, and then some people ask, I think it really works out well if someone knows they're going to be away, if you can come into our office, fill the form out right while you're in the office, and then right away, once we verified that you're a registered voter and we've seen your ID, and it could be a passport, it could be a driver's license, a student ID. Once we verified that you are who you say you are, then we will give you either a Republican or a Democrat absentee ballot. If you're an undeclared voter, you'll have that opportunity to pick which one you would like to receive, and then you can fill it out right in our office. We'll hand you a pen, even a pencil can be used. You'll complete it, you'll turn it back into us, and then we're required by state statute to enter everything we do into the HAVA system, Help America Vote Act. And that's that checks and balances that we talked about before, Jonathan. Everything is documented there. Sherry Farrell requested an absentee ballot, we put it in the computer. She dropped it off, it was received back. Everything is there so that we know and that we're aware.
In a couple of questions and observations, somebody I know was not going to be available for a recent election. They went in, requested an absentee. There were some little carols set up outside the town clerk's office with the dividers, sat down, completed it, handed it back in appropriately.
Right.
When they got home, they looked online and they saw that they had been given a ballot, the ballot had been returned, and now it's back in your possession. So what happens to those returned ballots up until election day?
So and just one other point I wanted to mention, let's say, Jonathan, Martha was going to be away and you wanted to return her absentee ballot for you. Even as the moderator, as the town clerk, by law, we can't just say, hey, here's my ID, here's the ballot, I'm just going to turn it in. If that's the situation for a child or for even an elderly person you're helping out, the State requires, it's an absentee return form, absentee ballot return form that must be filled out saying who you are, basically who you're returning the ballot for. And again, it's got checks and balances along the way, but it can absolutely be done. Or
Okay.
me for John, or however it happened to be. And then what we do, we keep them alphabetically secured, always in our vault. And I should have mentioned this before, when the absentee ballots arrive from the Secretary of State's office, we put them right into our vault. Nothing is left around. We take account of what we received, and then we only take them out to be processed in packs of 25 that we've counted. And not counted once, counted 2 or 3, 4 times to make sure the accuracy is there. At the end of the night, everything is returned to the vaulted area for security.
Okay, that's great. And I know I get questions, I travel sometimes, talk to folks in other states, and in New Hampshire we have absentee voting. We do not have mail-in voting.
Or voter voting.
Or early voting.
Right, or early voting, right.
So, yes, we use the U.S. mail system to
Yes.
send and receive absentee ballots, but it's not technically mail-in voting.
It's not early voting.
Yeah.
And it's confusing because we know, because we do this every day.
Right.
But for people that are voting, you know, absentee maybe for the first time, we get a lot of questions. We're so close to the Massachusetts border that many people who've just moved up here will say, oh, you have early voting? No, we do not.
No, we do not.
Absentee ballot is simply just cast on election day, not before. It's basically not touched before, just checked into the state system.
And if I were to bring my absentee ballot to the town hall, I need to turn it in to a person. I know there's a drop box outside the front door for
Car
tax payments.
registrations, taxes.
Please do not put your completed
absolutely.
absentee ballot in there. We do not have unattended drop boxes.
No.
They're not allowed in New Hampshire, and that's an unattended drop box. So,
And unfortunately, if you do that, we will do our best to reach out and contact the voter, but there's a chance that your vote won't count.
Yeah.
You know, and so and we will do our best to put little notices on those drop boxes. But as Jonathan said, they're for everything else but. Do not leave your absentee ballot there.
right, good point. And I mentioned earlier that voters can go to a website to track the status of their absentee ballot.
Yes. sos.nh.gov, Secretary of State's office, a phenomenal site, and you can really see, you described it perfectly, whether or not your ballot has been received, if it's been cast. You can check your party affiliation. It's just a great site, plus a lot of other good information on the Secretary of State's website, just like our town website.
Exactly.
Wealth of knowledge.
And there is a voting and elections link on our website, our town
yes.
website, where we try to keep updated information
Yes.
about upcoming elections and some of these processes.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Jonathan.
So on election day, with a police escort, we transport those returned absentee ballots and the ballots for election day for the in-person voters over to the high school gym. They're kept under lock and key. And question we get is, so when are the absentee ballots counted? Well, they're counted on election day, not before.
Absolutely.
But and the law. Remember we
The
talked
law.
about there are laws?
Yes.
We cannot process absentee ballots until 2 hours after the polls open, because if a voter who voted absentee decides, no, I'd rather come vote in person, we can find your absentee ballot, they're filed alphabetically, pull it out, and then give you an in-person ballot that day, up until 8 o'clock.
Absolutely.
Our polls open at 6,
Yes.
so up until 8 a.m., which is, I don't want to call it a quirk in the law, that's what the law is,
It is,
and we follow the
and
law.
we have to post it. It has to be posted throughout the election polling area, which helps everyone. You know, just the more visual aids we have around, the better.
And we have a crew that processes the absentee ballots, which is to check off the name, that when the ballot comes in, open the outer envelope, take the affidavit envelope out, and again confirm to make sure that it's the same person. And then once all the paperwork is in order, that affidavit envelope is sliced open, the ballot is removed, and then the ballot is counted in one of our AccuVote machines, like all the in-person ballots.
Absolutely. And all very transparent. People can observe. It's all right out in the open there. The only other little thing that we have to do is, and which I found fascinating in the beginning, is we have to say the person's name into the mic so that in case there's a challenge or anything is going on, but I would say Jonathan Kipp, and then we would look at the ballot, examine it, and then process it.
And sometimes, and it breaks our heart to do it, we have to reject an absentee ballot. And there's a long list of reasons to reject absentee ballots, and that's my responsibility as moderator to determine. One of the biggest ones is the voter forgot to sign their application or their affidavit envelope. If there's a different name on the application from the affidavit. So whatever the reason is, we reject it, but then we make every effort to reach out to that voter by phone, because this is now on election day. Time is very limited. It's a great success story, though, when we actually reach a voter and they say, oh, thank you so much, and they can then come in and the term varies, either cure their ballot or remedy their ballot so that all is in order and their ballot is going to get cast and counted.
Yeah, which is, it's just a great process to be a part of. You know,
It really
just making
is.
sure that every voter is reached.
Yep.
You know, we absolutely do. Everyone does their best with that.
Correct.
One other little problem, Jonathan, too, is I was mentioning about Florida, Colorado, people, you know, in another state, when they return their absentee ballot, they have to make sure that the address that's on the front is their Londonderry address, because that's where they're a registered voter, and that can cause a problem too.
Okay.
Yeah, so you want to make sure, Londonderry address. And then the other problem that we see, there are 2 envelopes that the absentee voter receives. The odor envelope and then the affidavit envelope. And this, the voter will have the opportunity to sign either as the absentee voter or if somebody else was assisting them. Most important takeaway from this is the ballot must go into the affidavit envelope and it must be sealed. And sometimes we do have them come back to us where people just put the ballot into the larger envelope with this affidavit envelope completed, but it needs to be sealed. It's kind of a checks and double checks again for us.
And the law says we have to reject those, unfortunately.
It really does.
Yep. And you mentioned earlier that for a primary election, they request either a Democratic or a Republican ballot.
Right.
That's only for a primary.
Only for
They're not Republican or Democratic ballots for any other election, including the town election or the general election.
Or the general. The general, everyone that has been selected in the primary will be on the ballot, and that's your opportunity to pick whoever you like. Exactly,
Right.
Jonathan.
So-
And some people do, they come into election day expecting that they're one party or the other, and it's heartbreaking because that's out of our control.
It
If
is.
it was up to us, but it's just not.
It's not.
the election law that we have to follow so that it's fair for all voters. And
Exactly.
candidates too.
Well, thank you, Sherry. That covers many of the questions we get around absentee voting, and I hope this has provided some clarification for our viewers out there. So thank you for sharing all that with us.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. And you can always call if you have questions. That's why we're there.
Excellent.